One-on-one with Santa.
Yeah. All right. So, hello and welcome back to another episode of Role Playing as Smart People and a little series I like to call One-on-One with Santa. And joining me today, I have Grant Howitt from Rowan Rook Deckard. Hello.
Hello.
And how are you
Happy
today?
to be here.
Oh,
I'm good. I'm good. I'm a pint of blood down. I went into town and performed my civic duty, and I let them take a whole pint of blood out of me. So I'm a little bit wobbly.
you got to feed
But
the vampires, right?
absolutely, yeah. Plus, I believe I'm a universal donor, so it makes me feel a little bit special when I go in. And they're like, "Oh, come this way, sir. Come this way." Because they can do like 4 babies out of one donation from me, so I feel pretty special about that. I think like whatever I did today, far better than going to work, which I should have done.
Work's boring though.
Mm.
Well, I guess yours probably not as much, eh?
Not so much. No, I have worked very hard to make it so that my job is writing not stories about elves, but ideas for stories about elves that someone else can tell. It's a pretty sweet job. It's all right.
Yeah. I don't think many people can say that. And I
Mm.
definitely want to bring that up forward, but I like to ask a little question right before we get into it. But how did you first get into the tabletop hobby to begin with?
How did I get into it? I was always a sensitive and easily impressed child, and I struggled to make friends. So naturally, Warhammer was a suitable place for me to end up.
Hmm.
I and the other weirdos from primary school would go and spend far too much money on little boxes of plastic models, and that was kind of my route into the world. The first time I ever saw someone doing role playing, like the first time I saw a role playing happening was the year 2000. It was before Games Day, which was the what used to be the big Games Workshop convention,
Hmm.
the in-house one. And they like we were sleeping over in Games Workshop Carlisle, and Carlisle is a place in the north of England where you change trains, and I happened to live there for 9 years. But we were staying there, and some older boys were playing a game of Sabat. And they were just, which is for the uninitiated, that's a Vampire the Masquerade, but you're mean rather than sad,
The Sabat.
uh, and and they were just sort of messing around and being violent towards NPCs, and I thought it was absolutely magical. I thought it's absolutely astonishing, and because they were older boys, I wasn't allowed to play.
Yeah.
But I was blown away by it. I saw that, and then I just started. We didn't have a great deal of money growing up, and also I lived in after that quite soon after that I moved to Portugal. My
Hmm.
folks had my dad bought holiday homes over there when they were cheap as chips in the 80s. And instead of having an actual job, he's just run a series of scams on the government involving those houses. So I moved over there, which meant couldn't really buy anything. It was kind of before the internet was really such a big thing in terms of distributing games or PDFs and that sort of thing. So I just downloaded as many free PDFs as I could, or more accurately, I copy and pasted Angelfire websites into text documents,
Hmm.
and then read them offline because dial-up was expensive. And that's how I got started. I very much sort of found my own way in. I didn't have someone to guide me, which I think which I think has sort of molded me in some ways, which I'm not super happy about. I would have liked to have an older boy there who could say, "All right, Grant, here's we're just gonna skip the first 4 years of experimentation and show you what a good role playing game is." But I got there eventually.
No, that sounds. I've actually heard a lot of people say that they kind of got in just through their own pure curiosity. Only a few people
Mm,
had older brothers. I was not one of those. I didn't get until I was in my
mm,
20s, uh,
yeah.
what, 10 or so years ago. Yeah. But yeah, and now you're working, was it Rowan Rook Deckard? That's
Rowan Rook and Deckard, yes. We picked the firm which most sounded like a fantasy law firm. We wanted there's a game, a live games company called Matheson Marco,
Mhm.
which is run by Holly Gramazio and someone else, Sophie Sampson, I believe, which is neither of their names.
Yeah,
But Matheson Marco sounds really clever.
it
So
does.
so I was like, oh yeah, we can do that. We can just put some bullshit names in there. So we did, and so these are just character names which we've had.
I've been
Um,
wondering that
it's not,
too.
yeah,
Because I was looking, I was like,
yeah.
who's the original Rowan, Rook, and Deckard? And I was looking, I was like, I can't find mention
Mm.
of these people anywhere. So it
Our
so
mysterious founders.
so literally, you kind of just did it because it sounded cool. That
Yeah,
I if I knew
absolutely.
that, that would have saved me like an hour worth of research. I'm
But
sorry,
I mean,
I found that hilarious.
you spent that on the website. That's fine. Like,
Yeah.
like odds are you'll purchase something at that point. So, I mean, at
Um,
that point, I'll just claim it was an ARG. That's fine.
I like that. I actually really like that. That's an awesome way to figure out a name. Um, so I actually found out about Rowan Rook and Deckard through Unbound as I was looking for
Mhm.
something to do with cards, and I never
Mm.
seen it before. I was like, is there any games that work with cards at all? And this was even way before even thinking of the podcast. What made you guys actually decide to make that system, which in its own is extremely unique?
It's a fascinating game.
It
It
is.
kind of works as well, which I like. It's broadly functional. So this was the first game which Chris and I wrote together. Chris is Deckard, from the three of us, and I'm Rook, and Maz, the third person, is Rowan.
Ah,
But we were that was the first game which Chris and I had written together. I'd put a Goblin Quest with Maz. We weren't really a business or anything.
mhm.
Maz was looking after the business side of things for me and doing the numbers, and I was making the words come out pretty. And then I moved to so Maz also is my partner.
Yeah.
My romantic life partner, and Chris is my non-romantic life partner, and we all happen to run a business together. And uh, I moved to New York
Mm.
with Maz back in 2015 or 14, one of those years. And I got to tell you, New York, pretty much one of the worst places I've been. Hate it. But
Really?
a lot of places that bad at least have the decency to be cheap. But
Oh.
New York is both unpleasant and expensive. I've no time for it. It's either too hot or too cold. Everyone's furious,
Mhm.
and shouting is the main method of communication. So I was desperately sad being in New York. I wasn't having a very good time. I'd just
Mhm.
come from Sydney, Australia, which was a absolute just a paradise where there's brightly coloured dinosaurs fly over your head and screech in the morning. It's beautiful. Birds, I suppose they call them. And Chris had just split up with his wife at that point, and so he had
Mhm.
to move back in with his parents. We were both having a rotten time with things, and we were
Yeah.
going mad. And we'd finished most of the missions on Grand Theft Auto 5, so we decided what we should do is write a game together. And so it began as a fantasy heartbreaker. It began, I think it was D20.
Yep.
We like the first idea we had was, what if all of your stats were hit points? And so we started writing a game around that, and then it got it got less generic and more generic and back and forth and back and forth.
Mhm.
But what we ended up with, the idea of the cards, the interesting thing for us was the way in which it could function as your hit points.
Mhm.
So, like initially with Unbound, or also for anyone who doesn't know, who's listening to this, Unbound is an older game which Chris and I wrote, and the idea is that it's a generic cinematic action game. It does pulp stories, big over the top fights, generally involving some sort of robotic suit. And the players make up their own setting with the GM as they go through. Like it does a brilliant session zero, and honestly, a serviceable campaign, a fine campaign by the book. Point being, one of the things which we wanted to get was that you didn't have a character sheet, and that your deck was everything.
Mhm.
And we used to do more with the deck. We used to have this ritual at the start of each campaign of Unbound where you took a card out of your deck and tore it in half, to remove that card from the running.
Yeah.
And then mechanically, it wasn't very interesting. And also from a social point, social point of view, it was hugely unpleasant to do. It feels horrible to tear a card in half. It's
Yeah.
like pulling a page out of a paperback book. It's really like it's
Mm.
gross. And like there was a white like what we wanted to do was sort of have it as almost like a hazing ritual and be like, right, this isn't a deck of cards anymore. This is a special tool for this purpose.
Yeah.
But people hated it, so we cut it back. But the idea is that you have a deck of cards, and that's your hit points, and it's also the thing you use to resolve checks, and you put stamina on it, and there's various other fun things you can do to play it out. And that you can write things that have happened to your character on the cards and play with that, and it's. I think it was the like for all of the things which I'm proudest of in our game design works, but like from a mechanical point of view, I view myself as mechanically more of a bit of a workhorse in that I'll find a system that works, and the idea is that the game design is making everything fit into that system.
Yeah.
And so like Heart, for example, Heart has one way of resolving things, but we've changed the dressing around it. We've changed the pipes which go in and go out, so it's different and it's interesting. You have options, but there's one core mechanic which functions.
Yeah.
And that's me. Whereas Chris Chris sleeps about once every 3 weeks. He's on so many pills that he rattled if you shake him. His brain doesn't quite work in the same way as other people. And I'm going to say about once every 2 months, I'll just get a text message in the middle of the night going like something like, Grunt, you know clocks from Blades in the Dark? Yeah, what's that? They're just round check boxes, Grunt. and so my role in the business and Chris's role too is that we take these inspiration which the other has, and we take that, we refine it, and we sort of pass it back and forth and rub the sharp edges off and find out. And so what if your deck of cards was your health was Chris's idea, and that was such an interesting idea. It was like, well, okay, let's do the whole system around it then, because dice weren't very interesting to us. It wasn't working.
Yeah.
And just like we'd never seen anything like that before. And they also like we have stamina, which you play cards face down to give you a little like a shield, like in Halo, or any FPS these days. And I really liked how visible the cards were for that. How you like how characters literally have a health bar made up of cards, and you can knock them down and build it up and stuff. So that was quite neat too.
Yeah, no, what kind of drew me to it at first, like I was looking for a card game, but as I was reading, I was like, wow, you could really do almost any kind of style of game here. And the one thing I really liked was that you actually had, it was the first example I saw of how the battle map, it wasn't just, you move your hex one here, you had these zones that were actually built into it, and how even the character sheet will like the characters that you have will react to those zones, and you can really kind of just tailor it how you like. And I was kind of a little bit blown away with how much more fluid that kind of system worked compared to a standard game.
I stole it from Fate. It's like what I put like Fate has that, but Fate in Unbound we have connections which go between areas, which I think I stole from a game I wrote. Oh God, 12 years ago now, called Primetime Murder Justice. But you have in Fate, it's just like a grid, and you can move between the areas in the grid. And for Unbound, we wanted a bit more tactical, so we put in connections. But yeah, like one of the things which we really enjoyed. One of the things which we find interesting is being able to have a tactical game, because Chris is big on MMOs, and like Unbound plays a bit like an MMO at times. It's not quite, but it's nearly that. In terms of your positioning and your pushing and your pulling. I've completely lost my place.
You're talking.
It's gone.
You were discussing about how you constructed the battle map and how it actually reacts and kind of is like an MMO, like with how it functions.
Yes, that was it. Thank you. Yeah. So functionally, like you just draw 6 squares and connect them, and then that's your map.
Yeah.
And what the interesting thing for us was if there's nothing interesting there, it doesn't exist. So you can't just have a corridor. You
Mhm.
can't just have a featureless room. You can't have a 10 foot by 10 foot thing. Like there has to be something interesting which you can picture there.
Yeah.
And so the way that like we tried to push it so that zones weren't right. A zone is 10 meters across. A
Mhm.
zone's whatever you want it to be within the fiction. So if you're having a tense fight in a house, a zone is one room.
Yeah.
And then if you're having and because of the scale we work in Unbound, like we had a game where it was kind of a Mad Max style road warrior game, and so one of the areas in that was a mile long stretch of highway,
Hmm.
and just because if you're fighting on that bit, you're using your vehicle and you're dueling.
Yeah.
But we don't need to. We can just assume you're there rather than having you
Oh.
drive up and down. So pinning like trying to marry the idea of narrative importance and tactical importance was really interesting. I think we pulled it off quite nicely.
Yeah, you did. And and kind of on the flip side of that, I think it was, I forget the name of it. Was it the dynamic system part of it where that's where you focus more on the archetypes and like the actual descriptions of the characters in order to give benefits, and it was more fluid on
I
Unbound?
mean, that sounds. I don't remember anything. I don't remember writing anything you've just described, but it sounds great.
It was just it was I remember you had one where it was like the combat where it was more built towards, actually having the battle map, and then you had one that didn't use the battle map
Oh
on its
yes,
own.
sorry. There's dramatic and narrative.
That's it,
Dramatic and
dramatic
narrative
and narrative.
schemes.
Sorry.
Yes, so you can, which is something which we've carried on to our later designs, but we wanted combat to be a celebration
Hmm.
in that because like in the majority of role playing games, and I will say like maybe not these days, but the majority of role playing games which we played at the time and which we grew up playing, it's about fighting, it's about having a big fight, it was about
Yeah.
heroic action and daring do, and there was this I think like as the OSR that as the original form of the OSR, or just I suppose the old school was
Hmm.
dying and the old school resurgence was coming in, there was this idea which is like well, you want to try and sneak around combat and you want to try and get past this, you want to try and bypass this, and the idea of bypassing combat to us felt really kind of sticky and weird because well, we
Yeah.
built these characters, we want to see this happen, this is exciting, so let's make it a reward. You have one combat per session and it's great,
Yeah.
and then everything else just like and you can have a fight in a narrative scene, we're just not going to break out the maps, it's like
Yeah.
you're not going to die or anything, it's fine, we're just going to do the things and you get out and it happens. And it's I think like being able to it's a bit like in Final Fantasy when you get a like when you hit a random encounter, it goes "Tsh," and then the music starts, and it's like this is something else. You're
Yeah.
like this is a different thing from what's happening. We have different rules in here, but it's a branch of the same story.
Yeah, I almost kind of looked at it as almost like a cutscene, like where you see like all those actions
Yes,
that you
yes.
can't actually do in combat, but really adds to the story. And I always thought that was really cool.
Mm.
So that was actually an inspiration for your later RPGs, actually, like Spire and all that. Like the
Yeah. So actually, the thing. Well, Spire and Heart are much more narrative, much woollier, much
very much
looser.
so.
We don't deal with positioning and that sort of thing, and that comes from a there's a there's a show called Spaced on UK TV,
Yeah.
which was like early 2000s. It was quite formative for a lot of us. But there's a character, and at one point, someone comes up to him and she's telling him his life story. She's telling him her life story, and it's this really heartbreaking thing. And he's in the middle of a PS1 game, and he's like, "Skip to the end," and that became kind of a thing which people said for 3 or 4 years. Skip to the end, and we
Yeah.
had that as a design tenet, which is like in Heart and Inspire, we don't want to track all the money you've got, so then you can and then work out how much things cost so you can spend them, and
Mhm.
we work out an economy, which means that you'll be pushing too hard so you won't have enough money. What we do instead is work out, well, we want the place to run out of money, so here's what's happened. Here's how you run out of money, and then it uses the same system as everything else, the same system as hit points, the same system as madness or what have you. But the bad thing is you've run out of money. The bad thing is you've fallen down a hole, and just sort of just the exciting bit of role playing games.
Yeah.
But Hollows is our new thing, which we put into playtest very recently. You can find a download link on our website if you're clever and canny, or if we've gotten around to putting it on the front page yet. And Hollows is a very crunchy tactical game. It is the idea being is it's about fighting giant monsters, and we have a tactical grid, and the monster never moves on the grid. The monster's always present, and then it's just about your position relative to the monster. So whether you're in flank or at range or behind or approaching or retreating or hiding behind a wall or what have you, like for example, terrain is something your character does rather than something that's there.
Yeah.
So it's quite tricky to wrap your head around initially, but it makes for some interesting fights. And if you're not fighting a capital E entity in one of these Silent Hill style hollows, just a series of dice rolls. If you're just fighting some mooks, just a series of dice rolls. That's fine. You're not going to die. It isn't important enough for that.
Yeah.
And we learned that from Unbound. We learned the fact that like, okay, well, the stakes can be different, and like as long as the stakes are clear, then people can role play in a really interesting ways and push and pull and negotiate around that. Because it treats, I think by establishing clear stakes and then also saying, right, this isn't going to kill your character. The stakes here are X and Y, but you can carry on playing. People and treating people like grown-ups, it allows you to collaborate towards something interesting. There's still surprises, there's still things which we're going to go for, there's still stuff which we're not going to expect, but by giving us that grounding, it avoids some of the idea of, I don't know what to do, which is unfortunately always going to happen in every role-playing game.
Yeah, that actually sounds really cool. So what is the story behind Hall? Because I know, like, I've read through your entire Spire book, Heart book, and I love the lore and the stories that you have created, and just the fact that the one thing I really love about your guys' products is you don't explicitly say this is what it is. It's like, here's a little hook for you to grab onto if you want to use it, or here's that. So I know Hollow is different. It says it's a different world than Spire and all that. How are you creating that world?
Is, really vaguely. If you thought Spire was vague, no. So like Spire, I've said before that Spire is the game that we wrote because they wouldn't let us write Unknown Armies and Necromunda. And it is like Unknown Armies and Necromunda had an ugly kid. The idea of a giant city, which defies the laws of space and time. Great, fine. And then the idea that magic is simply scalpel belief, adjudicated by a predominant culture. I find that absolutely fascinating, and it's like Pratchett goes into that as well. But Unknown Armies, the postmodern magic ideas, the idea that magic arises from within society, is fascinating and wonderful to me. And like we started off doing that in Spire, we came up with various bits, and the way in which Chris and I write games is we write. There's maybe a couple of pages of fluff, and we'll start doing the mechanics, and we'll get the things. Oh, here's what the game's about. Okay, cool. And then we throw that one away, and then we come back and we change a few things, and we throw that one away, and then we come back and then this one, third draft. That's the one where we realized we didn't do defense properly.
Yeah,
every time. Every time we didn't work out how to defend. So fourth comes in, and fourth there's a lot of real sadness. But then 4, we've solved it, and then actually we haven't solved it, have we, Grant? Real depressive slump for about 2 weeks.
Yeah,
around the start of edition 5. And what that does is over the course of those successive iterations, we eventually sort of the bits we don't rip out make the shell of the game.
okay.
And so like the way, like the heart classes which stayed versus the ones which didn't, the heart mechanics which stayed, the Spire districts which stayed, those form the shape of the game. And there comes a point where Chris and I can look at something and go, right, that's heart, or that isn't heart. And we can understand what the shape is, and we can operate independently. And there's this sort of, we reach a little zeitgeist between the pair of us. And that's how we got to Spire. That's how we got to Heart. Hollows is a is much more hands off in terms of fiction.
Mhm.
So we aren't very concerned with the wider world. There's no particular home base, as it were. The idea behind Hollows, it started off as a monster hunting game in the deep south,
Mhm.
um, in like Southern Gothic, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And the idea it was called, what was it called? The Witch Hunters of Sumpsuckle Hollow was the name that we were knocking around for. Sorry,
Yeah.
Sumpsuckle Holler was the name, which we were knocking around for a bit. And we went back and forth. We did some really interesting things. We had, and again, we had those successive iterations. We had one which was solely based around the time of day it was.
Yeah.
We had a D4 system for a while. I think we had playing cards for a bit,
Yeah.
and I felt that the Southern Gothic genre, the tone, while I really love it, wasn't for me to tell.
Mhm.
I've been to Mississippi once. I was terrified by the raw amount of biomass. Just how much was alive out there?
Oh, no doubt.
Crazy. Oh, and moist. And so just like to come from a very tame island,
Yeah.
like to come from the south of England at that point, to this is the part of the bayou which we've actually looked after and put a path in. Now, please don't step 5 foot left or you'll die. That that level of oppression and almost like an uncaringness towards humans. It breeds this really interesting story. But it wasn't my story to tell. And so we
Mhm.
went back and forth. We did a few things. And what we ended up with eventually was a setting where it is 1860, roughly. We don't say that, we just imply that.
Yeah.
And the game takes place the game so far takes place in the Isles, which are the British Isles. And so it takes place around the fall of the British Empire.
Oh.
But I hate history, in as much as I'm sure it's interesting in some capacity, but my school had never received an ungraded paper. Ungraded means that they refused to give me an F.
Oh, yeah.
But my sort of my secondary school level education for history came back. They were like, we're not even going to put a number on this. So my level of research is dedicated. It's Wikipedia and down. I'm not especially interested in that. We didn't want to try and do a historical game. We didn't want to try and talk
Yeah.
about those things, but we wanted to get far enough away from the real world so it can feel fantastical and interesting,
Yeah.
but also to a point where weapons tech, because the game is about weapons, because we set it up as this Wild West game.
Yeah.
Your rolling block rifle is one of the scariest things you can have. Like we just got revolvers with like cased ammo, that sort of thing, rather than making your own slugs and your own little packets of
Mhm.
paper. And the idea, and then it just started to sort of blossom out of there. The gag is that when something really bad happens, it forms a hollow.
Yeah.
And this is like generally we have them around people, but it can be around things or animals or places or what have you. But when enough bad magic builds up, it goes off and it forms a pocket dimension. And
Oh.
it's a bit like Silent Hill crossed with Bloodborne. It's wrapped around one person. They don't know they're in it. They transform into a giant monster. There are other giant monsters appear in there, and only people who have been scarred with some sort of trauma can get in and fight it,
Oh.
namely hunters who are the player characters. Um, and so we've gone from we've gone from Spire, which is a fundamentally fruitless game about being shot in the street, to Heart, which is a game about dying in the best way possible. Chris and
Mhm.
I both got therapy in between Heart and now. And we both got the kind of therapy which works a little bit. Mine's worked
Yeah.
brilliantly. I'm no longer depressed. It's weird, but now in Hollows is not a game about dying well. It is not a game about futility. It's not a game about struggle. It's a game about trying to make. It's about leveraging toxic traits for
Yeah.
positive change, which we tell through the medium of shotgunning a monster's face off.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's
Mm,
actually that's a really cool way to actually explain it. I was reading a little bit about it, and it sounded really neat. And I did get the Bloodborne vibes while I was reading it.
mhm,
But yeah,
mm.
which is I honestly when I saw it's like your weapon hates, I'm like, okay, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's a really neat way.
I've got to say, it was an absolute. Disco Elysium was an absolute fucking godsend.
Disco
In
Elysium.
that we, yeah, like we were trying to find the tone for the game. We were trying to work out what it was, and we
Yeah,
were going through, and we had all these weapons, and we were like, okay, well, we want different kinds of pistol. Oh, okay, we want different rules for a great axe and a great sword. We have all these cool, and it can like your class is your weapon. You can build this stuff up, but it just wasn't selling it. And then we hit upon the idea of doing iconic weapons. So we get the list as short as possible for things
yeah,
you could fight a dragon with in 1860, and then the lies those weapons tell you. And like I think there's something fascinating about because like we don't have weapons in this country. We
yeah,
don't. That's not a. It's not a. I've I've never seen a gun
yeah,
outside of the hands of a police officer, or and even then, like that's rare.
yeah,
But like we were in like the idea of guns and weaponry, and especially like the Americana idea of like this is totemic and powerful and valuable and crucial.
yeah.
um Playing with and how that ties into masculinity, and how masculinity ties into the idea of existence, and like, well, if you're not a real man, you're nothing. And so to be able to just like funnel that down
Yeah.
into a pistol saying you're so much better than he is, kill him. That's kind of fun.
Yeah. No, that's a really cool way to kind of almost isolate those kind of emotions and those feelings and
Mm,
into something that I think everyone can kind of understand. And that's a really
mhm.
that's actually super fascinating. I've never really
It's
I read it, but hearing you talk about it, I'm like, shit, that's actually a lot. That's
it's
really
like
cool.
so we're currently working on expanding the setting. We're
Yeah.
working on cosmology of Hollows,
Yeah.
and we wanted to keep it quite street level, quite vague. Like I didn't want to have a game where you save the world, but more
Yeah.
that you save this person. But we also we want to think about what the general trends were, so you could theme a campaign, or so you could make decisions and understand, and also because that makes for a better community.
Yeah.
We found that the more touch points you can give people, the more um, enabled they feel to create their own worlds and their own elements within the setting, and so
Yeah.
that means the community forms and people get happy, which is nice. And so we were talking about these things called the grand malignancies, of which we have six, which are the problems inherent in the Isles in 1860, and
Yeah.
they are, what are they? Hunger, pride, grief, and three others. So my memory is not what it used to be.
Yeah.
But the so you know, Chris and I we live quite close to each other now, which is nice. So we went to town, we had lunch, we chatted through like what's the issues, what's the deal, how can we mechanize these, how can we cement these into the world in a way which isn't just us saying, hey, here's some stuff over here, have fun with it.
Yeah.
So what with these malignancies, the first time every player character is broken in combat, they run out of resolve and they can be more easily killed. It triggers a special power based on which one of those scarred them. So like
Oh.
the hunger one is cool. You get another use of an expendable item. Or the like the wrath one is you lash out at everyone around you, and the fewer hunters there are in your area, the more damage you do to the baddie. That sort of thing. But I was right in the second person fiction for all of these malignancies, which are just like these are the toxic traits which are ruining
Yeah.
everything. And I sent it over to Chris, and he sent it back, and he was like, "Yeah, this is great. Sounds a bit positive, though, Grant." And what I tried really, I'm glad you said that, because I tried really hard to make all of them sound like a good idea.
Yeah.
And with the weapons and hollows, I was really keen to have everything like beguiling, exciting,
Yeah.
affirming, And there's so like I spent such a long time of my existence, and I still do on occasion, feeling unsure about myself and uncomfortable and directionless and feeling like I didn't have a place in the world, like I was an aberration. And
Yeah.
so each of these weapons is like, it's like, no, you're powerful, you matter. You can fuck shit up. Go fuck shit up. It's what you're supposed to do, son.
Yeah.
So yeah.
No, that sounds awesome, and I really like the sound of how it you have a really unique. I don't want to call it a battle map because it's not really a battle map, but the way how you're explaining how combat works,
Mm.
it really sounds. I like when you mentioned that Unbound was like Fate. I was like, yeah, I could see it. I could see it definitely where you can get the inspiration from that. But that one, I'm just thinking
Mm.
is like I can't really think of anything besides maybe a like a video game, maybe. But it really doesn't do that
So
justice by
like
saying that.
ship combat, I think, is the closest thing. So like generally ship combat will have facing, and it will
Mhm.
have I played a fascinating game on the weekend called Tale of Pirates, which has a cutout. It's a board game. Has a
Yeah.
cutout cardboard pirate ship, and each of your tokens is a 15-second egg timer. And so, if you want to do a job on the ship, the game lasts for like 4 minutes. So you've got to jam it in there, and then when it runs out, the thing triggers, and so you're all sort of running around and
Oh.
yelling at each other and doing it. But that has your ship in the middle of the map, and
Mhm.
then the compass points around the sides. So it's there's rocks over here, there's a frigate over here, that sort of thing. But the interesting thing in Hollows is we flipped it.
Yeah.
So the baddie's in the middle,
And you're on
and
the outside.
everything else is around. And I think like I've not seen it in role playing games, but it's lock on. It's lock on targeting from
Yeah.
Bloodborne or Legend of Zelda or what have you. It's clicking in the right stick to say right. This is the important thing here, and where my position is to this is relative is interesting only as far as can I sneak up and am I near my friends? Am I out of the range of its dangerous attacks? And
Yeah.
so all combat in Hollows is against a single thing.
Mhm.
And if it's against more than one thing, then we're cheating and just fudging the rules to make it work.
No, that's actually I'm trying to think. So like that's I can't think of any game that really does that kind of combat. Which there I've seen games where you fight against like really big monsters, right? Like in tabletop games, but
Mm.
one where almost like that's the core focus and you're all around it. And I'm guessing some of the mechanics with the characters and all that kind of focus on where you are will give you benefit.
Hugely, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I will say as well, the One Ring has a lovely combat system. The One Ring does battle in that you are either in support, ranged, or frontline.
Yeah.
And like you can choose to move between, and you're better in certain places, but both sides have that. I think
Yeah.
what's it called? Ryutama has a weirdly involved combat system around that as well. It's fascinating. Like because it's an intensely Japanese game in that it doesn't sync up for me. I can't see the joins. Um, but the the powers, the abilities, like one of the things which again, along with skip to the end, one of our abilities, one of our tenets, our design tenets is abilities you just have to have. And we
Yeah.
want every single ability. And we're not always going to hit it because we're only human, but we try and have it as far as possible that there's no dead levels, and every single ability is like, oh, I want that. Oh, I'd love to have that. Oh, that would be great. And and it's quite hard to write, honestly, and
Yeah.
also because we don't like numbers bigger than about 6, so we don't have a lot of wiggle room in terms of our numerics. But so let's say, for example, the knife is very mobile, and the knife, one of the basic upgrades from tier 1 of knife is you do +1 wound when you're in rear, which means you can bring down
Mm.
the monster faster. And so there's no defensive powers in the knife aside from you can defend with quick. So you can defend by dodging rather than any other stat. Um, and you can do that by expending resource. So it's risky, and you're fragile, and you're getting in there, and you're stabbing, and you're getting out. And the neat thing is everyone picks 2 weapons at
Yeah.
startup. and so your class is defined in part by where you're but your which faction you used to work with,
Yeah.
like what power block in the Isles you used to run with, but the actual meat of the mechanical stuff comes from these weapons which you are imbuing with magical power. We steal a thing from Mage the Awakening. Yeah.
Oh.
Awakening? Yeah, the old purple one. Which up in
Was it Mage the Ascension, right? By White
is it
Wolf.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Is it Ascension or Apocalypse? No, it's Werewolf the
Uh,
Apocalypse.
yeah.
Anyway, the
Ascension.
one
Yeah.
which isn't about the Seers of the Throne, the one about where you can play a space wizard, or you can play a tree wizard, or you can play a god wizard, and you can all be friends.
Yeah.
The idea with that is you had a stat called Arete, which was your mastery of wizard of Wizbiz, and up until Arete 5, you had to have a foci to cast things through. And
Yeah.
the example they gave was like uh, you can't cook bread with your mind, but by using a toaster you can. And what a toaster does is a very limited, I think technically a forces two effect,
Yeah.
which increases the rate of heat around the bread, and so we wanted these weapons to be foci,
Mm.
which is you channeling the horrible things that have happened to you, your horrible worldviews, your torment outwards through a fine point.
Yeah.
And because they are magical in that way, we can get weirder and weirder and weirder with it. And
Yeah.
so we cut out a lot of the weirder stuff from the playtest because that's quite high level. But
Yeah.
we've got it lets us just start completely messing with mechanics and playing around with stuff and not having to have it like hang together within the fiction.
Hmm.
Because well, it's okay. You're a wizard. You're a very specific kind of beheading wizard.
Yeah.
But that's it gives us a lot of freedom. Like the bludgeon character is all about reducing the enemy stamina to zero.
Hmm.
And one of their high, like they're really horrible to be around. And one of their tier 3 unlock abilities is you can basically spend the baddie places threat and then on the table, and they expend threat to power their moves. You can spend it when you have no resolve left,
Oh.
and just like climbing directly into the thing's mouth and ripping its jaw off, or what have you. And it's like taking things like that,
Yeah.
messing around with that, establishing rules and then breaking them, and having that resonate in a way that's like, oh, that's exciting, oh, that's thrilling, and
Yeah.
that's what we're about.
That's and it sounds really neat because it sounds like you have a really good blend of this tactical combat, but in a manner that is still extremely thematic. And I think that's a hard balance to
Mm.
find, but from the sounds of it, it sounds like you found a really nice balance for that.
Well, I mean, we're getting there. We are, we've just entered playtest, and so we've done some private stuff. We ran some games at Gen Con,
Yeah.
and it's gone nicely. We've massively changed the system from where it was initially. We've done an awful lot of work on it, and I really hope that what we've got is the basis for a strong system. It's been a challenge as well because we've been in Spire and Heart for the last 5 years. We've been
2017, I
operating,
think the Kickstarter was.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I was writing it before that, and we've done Spire and two source books, two full size source books, and the other ones. And we've got Heart. We've got another source book for that coming up, and it was quite confronting to not have the comfortable pair of Spire trousers to pull on.
Yeah.
To not just sort of slip on my comfortable Spire hoodie and actually go like, no. The mechanics can be anything. What do
Yeah.
you want them to be? And it's quite nice to have the restrictions of an ongoing line, like the challenges we had with Heart, saying, well, how do we make a game about espionage and revolution tell a
Hmm.
story about impossible dungeon crawling? How do we make the system work? And we did, and it works well. And I don't know whether Hollows works yet. I hope it does. And I talk a big game, and I enjoy running it. I enjoy playing it. But I think what really excites me is one, getting it out to playtest and working with some artists and writers, because each Hollow is self-contained.
Yeah.
It gives us a lot of liberties with hiring people around. The art doesn't have to mesh.
Yeah.
the writing style doesn't have to mesh. We can get it because each one of these is your own sort of Silent Hill, Jacob's Ladder nightmare.
Mhm.
They can establish and break their own rules. That's fine. So I'm really excited to get a big proper mainline book out again. But also once the combat system is firmed up, like with all of our games, we're always interested in putting out a functional community license and a functional SRD so people can start iterating and making their own stuff. Because what I want to do with this, I want to fight mechs with it.
As a BattleTech player,
I
that is very exciting.
I want to have. I've got to say, really wish I liked BattleTech. I think the robots look like dorks. They look like tower blocks that have gotten out of hand. It's not my scene.
Oh, have you seen the new ones from Catalyst? Oh, they look good now.
Probably not. No. Are
Oh,
they? If they look good now, that's great. I like a fat robot, but I understand. What I really want to do is have a game of 4 to 6 people use improvised equipment to take down a single mech.
Oh.
So you've got one guy with a jump pack, you've got one guy with mag bombs, you've got one guy who can get in there and hijack it for a bit.
Yeah.
And just and because we've got the tactical positioning, there's lots of fun things we can do. There's lots of Shadow of the Colossus. Fuck it, even D&D. Like to make a game where you fight dragons like this.
Like a Dragon Slayer one, or what's the? I'm trying to think of that movie that was, I think it was in Norway, but it was all about hunting trolls.
Yeah, like Troll Hunter.
That seems pretty self-explanatory for the name of the movie, but yeah, that would be really cool. While you're kind of talking, I thought, would it be possible? Now, this is would it be possible to do almost like a play on a Moby Dick style hunt where you guys are in little robot? Would that be possible?
That was suggested literally in our Discord this morning, and yes,
it wasn't me. I swear. I swear.
Like, yeah. It honestly, it'd be weird if you brought it up now and didn't mention it. Yeah, absolutely, because like the out of combat play, the exploration gives you a map, and much like with Unbound, you've just got a location. You've got a zone, and there's something interesting in there, and there's either lore or an entity or both. And lore is what you spend to. I wanted to skip to the end of this creature is weak versus Wolfsbane, because at that point you have to write a bestiary. You have to put Wolfsbane in the world. You have to make Wolfsbane hard to get, and it's either awkward or a formality after it's been interesting once. And so what we've done instead is we have lore, and so lore is generic untyped data. And then you spend it to unlock weaknesses on the monster. So you can say, right, I'm spending 3 lore. This thing's weak versus Wolfbane. I've got some Wolfbane. It's got defense -2, and that sticks until you kill the thing.
That's actually really...
which it's okay. There's upsides and downsides.
No, I was thinking it's kind of cool.
That's the thing. It's cool, and I'm glad you like it. The idea was that I didn't want to have to define a world, but let players do that themselves, because holos are so distinct and they make their own rules. But also it means that there's something quite exciting about looking up the monster in the monster manual, or like you fight it and you get chased off, and then you find a sage, and the sage is like, it's weak versus Wolfsbane. You can find some Wolfsbane in the caverns of... And you go to the caverns of... and you do the thing, and you come back, and you feel like you're part of a living, breathing world.
Yeah.
Which is great. But also, a lot of work. So we just sort of cut all the fluff off it.
Yeah.
Yes, so the exploration is you have these areas and they have something in them, and so you could absolutely, definitely have, right, here's bits of sea, here's an island, here's what you're after here, and like there's Moby Dick, but there's also various things you're hunting. The ships made out of the stuff that you're fighting and dragging down. There's octopuses, there's pirates. I mean, you could use it to simulate a pirate ship, as long as like once someone comes off the pirate ship, system doesn't quite work. But if there's 50 guys in a pirate ship, you could run it in hollows. That's fine.
Yeah, no, I'm also getting a little bit of like Monster Hunter World here, where you're not there to you're not there to fight 10 dozen things. You have one specific goal to try and
Mhm.
get this one thing down. Now, it's going to be a pain and it's going to take a while, but it's going to be very engaging. And I'm getting a lot
Mhm.
from that. And I love Monster Hunt style games. I freaking
Mhm.
love things where you're only fighting one big monster or one really difficult thing to go for. And like this is hitting a lot of notes for me and things that I really enjoy and things I enjoy running. Uh, and
Mhm.
out of all those, one criticism I usually have is it doesn't seem like the combat is always it doesn't always seem to work with the aspect of one big monster with a bunch of people. And
Mm.
that's what like and it sounds like you've kind of maybe you're still working on it, but it sounds like you almost have a method of really handling that in a really nice way. And that's
Absolutely,
really
yeah. Like that, and that's what all of our work's been towards. Is pushing for that.
yeah.
The most combat systems are quite good at simulating fights between parties of equal sizes.
Yeah.
And if you throw in a few props here and there and you have a bit of terrain, then that makes it interesting. But generally, you're rolling dice and it does the thing, and that's fine.
Yeah.
Whereas it's a bit like so Dungeons and Dragons, most fights aren't against dragons. So when they have a dragon, they want it to be big and scary. And so it's got lair abilities, it's got debuffs, it's got dragon fear. I don't know whether that's still knocking around in this edition. They've got all kinds of horrible things, which makes a dragon hard to fight. And it starts taking the system, which is designed to kick goblins downstairs, and it really starts straining. Because
Oh,
this thing's an infinite bag of hit points. Well, not
yeah.
infinite, but it's got a big old bag of hit points. And I think you end up in a similar challenge to Scion,
Yeah.
the old White Wolf game, which tried to use exactly the same system to um, to to kick a dog, and the god of dogs used exactly the same thing, but just moved up the scale. So you're
Yeah.
doing things like, okay, the god of dogs has 36 automatic successes on any bite check. And it's like that's you've come too far.
Yeah.
Just give me different games at that point. And so yeah, like we tried to have it as this is the this is what the game's about. It's going to do this thing very well. It's fine at the other stuff, and you can have a fight against an equal party. Like we've had, I think in every playtest we've had 3 or 4 hunters against a cult of entity worshippers,
Yeah.
and it takes about 3 minutes as you narrate through a cool scene, and then you carry on and carry on playing. But I really hope it works. We've always tried to do something different and interesting. We've always tried to push for something weird because when we set up this business, we wanted security, so Chris
Mhm.
and I could do this, and not I didn't have to go back to an office job because I bloody hate office jobs, and Chris didn't have to go back into retail, which is like an office job, but you stand up,
Mhm.
and I we formed it out of security, but also because we wanted to be creatively challenged. We wanted to try and do interesting things,
Yeah.
and thankfully, because Maz is a weapons grade genius, and has a great head for numbers and business, and so we've managed to build a system, managed to build a business, which means that our ideas have a place to go and a place to draw money from those, and
Yeah.
then we can continue doing weird stuff. We have enough of an audience and an interest, and we're now savvy enough around marketing. I don't like paying for marketing, but I like talking about my things in a cheeky way, which makes you click on something.
Yeah.
And so like we've got to the point where we can run this as a business and we can do weird stuff and it can work. It doesn't always work, but it's great,
Yeah.
honestly.
Oh, and to be honest, like I've heard this from a few creators out there where they've said you don't get into the tabletop RPG game to make money. You do it to create. But it sounds like you guys have you've created your own like company that actually is self-sustaining and is you're able
Mhm.
to do your dream. What is that like to
I
be able
mean,
to do this
the
on a
thing
day
is,
to day?
it's hard to make money. The infrastructure is less apparent than in other industries, and also
Mhm.
just in terms of like if you think of tech, thousands of places you can go, tens of thousands of places you can go to learn
Yeah.
about technology, and also investors. and people will give you money to do things. No one's really investing in role playing game books. And the if we were to get someone, the numbers that they're running aren't really going to happen. I mean, if you think of things like what was it called? Roll, yeah, Roll, like the platform, the VTT platform, which was pushed really heavily about 2 years ago and then disappeared. The idea being that you can market a success, you can push for something, but we're not super interested in that. It is quite hard to make money. It helps if you have I'm running on easy mode here, mate. You know, I'm English speaking. I've got all functional limbs. I'm able-bodied. I'm cis. I'm straight passing. I'm white. I speak English. There are very few doors closed in front of me to making a career in this. But we try really hard. We have a level of, I certainly have a level of, I wouldn't say perfectionism, but pride in my work, which will see me rewriting things over and over, trying to get them to the right thing, and be like, oh, we need to crop this, or we need to change this, or we need to make this work, or can we get this better? And Chris and I will spend like an hour or two going back on the name for a class or something, because it's like, actually, this has to resonate. Actually, this matters.
Yeah.
And what we're producing is a luxury product for a niche within a niche industry. And so we want something, and luxury as in, I mean luxury as in non-essential rather than made out of velvet. Although some of the stuff is pretty nice.
I would also like to see a velvet book. That would be very nice. Good on the hands.
We've got leather bound. Have I got my leather bound here? I do. Have I got it here? Is it next door? It's next door. We had Heart bound in leather by professional leather printers, professional leather binders, and like embossed with a giant machine you have to pull down with gold foil on it. And they cost £250 each. And I don't feel comfortable having them in the house. I wouldn't spend that on a book. I go to fucking Gen Con. We sold 7 of them.
Jesus. Paul,
it's a couple out of spite, it seems. And it's like I thought twice about getting cheese on my sandwich this afternoon because it was 50p extra.
Yep.
I'm like, I'm not wanting for cash or anything, but like, how is people like, oh yeah, sure, I'll spend that. I guess they're in the tech industry. I've got to presume they're all programmers. It's like it's us and furry artists.
No, yeah, that's crazy. Like, that's an expensive book. Like, it's super cool.
It's the same middle as the normal one, and 10 times the cost.
Well, have you even? Yeah. Well, even have you seen like the price? We're getting a little off topic, but have you even seen the price of some dice out there? I went to my local game store, and they're like, "Oh yeah," they're like, "We have these dice in the cabinet." And I was like looking for a specific dice just for a certain game I was running, and I also was getting some dice of shame for people who forget their dice at home. But he was like, "Oh yeah, we have these dice over here." I was like, "Oh wow, those are really nice," and they're like aluminum and they have like engraved. I was like, "How much is that?" "Oh, that's about $140." I'm like, if I came back with that,
mate, that's fuck all. We at Gen Con, some of us attended a rare dice auction.
A rare dice auction?
There are secret. So Level Up Dice who did this. So we published the Die RPG.
Yeah.
And Level Up Dice, I think it was before the whole making dice out of German tanks furore, which they went into. We project manager Zach went along to their to a party they were doing at Gen Con because they were doing dice for us for the Die RPG.
Yeah.
And we're talking like tens of thousands of dollars on dice, just because this is an important dice, or this dice is made out of mammoth bones. But like we're selling dice. We're selling sets of dice for £300. They're made out of. We had to find non-conflict obsidian to make the D20. It is daft what people will pay. I can't wrap my head around it. But people are passionate about things. People are excited about things. And so if you say, look, here's a way in which you can be passionate and excited, and also it supports us, that's good.
Yeah.
That's great. I can't quite puzzle it out myself.
Oh, I shouldn't be surprised because I've even I have my own little card collection, right? But I've
Ah,
looked at cards that are like thousands of dollars, like playing cards.
yeah.
There are thousands of
Hmm,
dollars. So it's like, how the hell are they that much? And then it turns out it's because, oh, these are from like the 1920s, these are from like the 1800s,
hmm.
which not many decks exist because those decks were not treated at the time. So they,
Well, no, no,
yeah. So I was like, okay, that makes
they're
sense.
tools.
But wow, thousands of dollars
Yeah, no, it's
and
like
hundreds of dollars.
there's a fascinating what we in the Kickstarter business call whales
Yeah.
around the idea of people who are willing to just turn up and just click the biggest button. And it is a like part like one of the interesting things I've seen about Kickstarters that don't do very well, or like they'll get hundreds and hundreds of backers, but they don't really hit that high point, is because they haven't. You have to kind of put in a joke tier for people who have too much money. For when a nobleman drives past
Yeah.
in their carriage and says, "Ah, an urchin boy hawking wares about goblins. Here, I'll take the whole collection," and just throws a coin purse out.
Yeah.
You got to give him the option. Otherwise, you'll just spend £10 and never read it.
Yeah. Oh, it's funny that you mentioned that because I've looked at a few RPGs where it's like, yeah, you know what? If you back this tier for $400, you'll have a character in the book. And I'm like, I would never do that. And then I look at it's like already sold out, and I'm like, so
Yeah.
that makes a lot of sense. That's it.
Yeah.
Like I always thought it would be cool, but
In the book is fascinating. We did that. We went above and beyond as well, because most people just most Kickstarters will do a thing where it's we'll put you in the book,
yeah,
and so they have there is about 20% of all the characters in the book become guys with beards and glasses, because that's who backs Kickstarters.
you
And
don't
there's the
say.
yeah, weird, huh? And so there's an element of well, that like he's a Kickstarter backer, he's a Kickstarter backer, that guy's a Kickstarter backer,
Yeah,
and so what, like, we wanted to avoid that. So what we did instead was we charged a fair whack. I mean, less than less than our day rates would, but it's private, so it's fine. And the deal was that we gave you a cult. So you told us like the idea for a cult that you liked,
yeah.
and then we'll write up rules for that. We'll get some art done for it. We also had in Sin, we had you could pay to have an NPC in the book, but the deal is the players had to have so much to gain from killing you. So because like this, it's always infuriating. You read an NPC and
Yeah.
it's like, oh well, she's beautiful, and her dad was an angel and her mum was a demon, and she's got one lavender eye and one cerulean eye, and it's just like, no. I want dog shit, please. I want someone who the characters are going to want to mug. And so every single page for NPC, you have more to gain by killing than leaving alive.
I'm gonna have to
Which we
reread.
did.
I'm gonna have to reread Spire and all that because there's been a few characters where I'm like, I would want them in my game because I would love for them to be murdered by and that was your
Mm.
intention.
Mm.
That so
So
was
that was Sin. Spire,
that was Sin. Oh, okay.
yeah, all of the new gods at the back of Spire
Oh,
are
okay.
all backer done. But it's not like we're going to draw you with your beard and your goatee. It's more like, what do you want? Do you have any cool ideas? And we gave them like a little drop down list of ideas. What are the domains? What are you interested in? Give us a little pitch. Then we take it away and we write something, and then people make judgment calls. Like, I think we've only had one which was rejected. And aside from that, and then we just changed the names on it and released it anyway. But it's
were any and like stories that you heard like about the NPCs like so good that you're like, we're going to add this into more of the core part of the game, or just out of curiosity?
oh well. So I will say one guy just wrote I forget the name of the NPC, but he turned in a 3 paragraphs of properly spelled and grammatically organized in character fiction, which was correct, and it hit the tone for Spire. So I think I just sort of moved one paragraph up and printed that in its entirety. It's like, well, you saved me a job, mate. That's perfect. I don't need to change anything.
Yeah.
And she sounds horrible, but like I found that there's one of the guys from one of the new gods from Spire, Garrick,
Mhm.
who is the cybernetic bionic implant god commissioned by Seth Steele. I found that we've needed to have a weird biomechanical cultists throughout the game, and so Garrick sort of stuck onto that as this is the step you go to if you want to start modifying
Oh,
yourself.
that's cool.
But no, generally, like, we got everything in place, and then we ran the Kickstarter, and then we got the stuff in. So, like, we pitched most of them as foreign gods or imported gods, so they didn't have to mesh too well.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, we also have, like, there's no canon Spire, no canon Heart, so we can get fast and loose with it, especially in the Heart. I mean, there's no
Yeah.
canon within that book, but the being able to say, like, right, there's a play, and it's existed for 40 years, except no one's mentioned it before because it's been suppressed, and now it's out, and that's fine because it's so loose. It's not like 40K where they're like, 10,000 years ago we started making tall Space Marines,
Yeah.
and we've just finished them.
Yeah.
We don't need to mess about with that level of fiction.
Yeah. One thing I kind of want to bring up because it was my actual favorite. It was a location that you had in Spire, and it was the one with the door that you nail your name to, and you go in and you'll pop out. And I
The
thought
mansion.
that was the coolest. Like not to belittle the rest of the book, but that was when I read that, I was like, that is the coolest idea I have ever read. And to this day, whenever people are like, it's just something I think is just so awesome.
It's straight Unknown Armies
Yeah.
as well. That is drawing entirely on the idea of, right, your name is important.
Yeah.
And culturally, your name matters. And what if you wanted to have it removed?
Yeah.
And I think we go into the Shadow Agent class, which was maybe a bit of a misfire. I think we didn't quite playtest it enough. We didn't quite balance it out right, and so it didn't really work as well as I would have hoped it to. But one of the medium abilities is you can get your true name surgically excised. And we don't go into any details about how that happens, but I love the idea of being able to, no, we can get some knives and make it happen. That can
Yeah.
work. And just like messing with concepts and like jamming concepts into contorting them into strange forms, I find really fun.
Yeah, no, I remember reading that and like I literally had to sit there for a moment and think of like that is so cool. How would this work in game? And it was just such a neat moment. Um, so going back to Harrows a little bit, um,
Hollows?
Hollow. Sorry, what did I say?
That's
Harrows?
okay.
Yeah,
Harrows.
no, sorry. I said
That's fine.
I have a tendency to say wrong words. But
Gr-
in
Great
Hollows.
job to have picked.
Yeah. I know, right? I know, right? No, it's pretty bad sometimes.
Yeah.
So what kind of timeline are you looking for that game for release or for Kickstarter at least?
Well, we've taken, I think, about 4 months. We're running about 4 months late on the playtest
Oh,
because we decided to take it seriously. And by
mhm.
late, I mean, like, we didn't promise it at a certain point. We just said, "Hey, sign up here, do the thing,
Yeah.
and we'll send you the PDF when it's done." And my initial idea was to release it quite bare bones, and let people dick about and see what they like, see what they don't, and then take some feedback. But we brought Maz on board, Rowan. We brought Maz on board as an editor and kind of a product manager for the book, and they've really pushed it. They've really pushed, like, the reason why it looks as nice as it does, why it reads as cleanly as it does, is, well, the reason why it looks nice is because Minerva McJander did the layout on it, and Maz worked really hard with her to push her in certain directions and get to a place where it was legible but weird,
Mhm.
which is really challenging. And also, just like in terms of the technical language, I write clean, but I like using the wrong terms for things. and so Maz was really good at going through and catching those. Um, so I think we started taking it more seriously. It started
Yeah.
off as a fairly sort of as a sideline thing, which we were going to do in between Heart source books and Die, and it seems like we've got enough interest there mechanically and fictionally that we want to treat it with some respect and make it into a big delicious thing, like a proper, like treat it with the same respect as Spire or Heart and give it a big release.
Yeah.
And I also think that it's probably got the potential for more mass appeal than Spire or Heart, given the subject nature.
Hmm.
It's an easier sell. You don't need to role play as much, and so like I think what we need to do is get a bunch more playtest reports in, see what the tone is, see if it works, and then we need to carry on learning on how to write this, and then how to teach people to write this, so we can get a more coherent product around. We've got a lot of monsters to write. We've got a lot of abilities to write.
Hmm.
And then, of course, the fine-tuning balancing comes in after that. I think I'd pig and love to have it on Kickstarter at Gen Con. That'd be wonderful. But I don't know.
Yeah.
I think at present we're just sort of we are we're trying to. I personally find that working as slowly as possible makes good books come out occasionally, and as long as they're really good, you can get by financially.
Yeah.
And so I feel that like I don't like pushing too hard for speed. I don't like trying to get something out before it's ready to cover our bases, and we are financially thankfully secure because we've got a pretty good pretty good web store, which we keep selling stuff through, which is nice. So I don't know. Like I'd love to get it out within a year, but we've got Die to get printed as well, which was a huge success for us last year, and Kieran Gillen. And so we've got to get that printed. We've got another Heart Source book to write because we wrote a very good role playing game. It won 7 Annie Awards, and then we just didn't do anything with it because we were busy and tired. And there was that pandemic which got in the way.
Yeah.
We've got what else we've got? I'm doing a game called Eat the Reich, which is
Yeah.
it's pulp comedy Nazi hunter vampires. Uh, where
So
you're dropped behind enemy lines and you need to drink increasingly high-ranking Nazis to level up your vampire powers. So, yeah, right. What a sell! What a sell!
oh my god, that just sounds hilarious.
Yeah, it is, and it's a challenge. So I'm like trying to hit the right tone with that. I'm working with an artist. To try. We haven't announced who it is yet, but very exciting artist, very cool. Like the same way that Roland Kunz and I did with Orc Borg, where he did all the layout and the art, I did all the writing. Going to do the same thing with this guy and split the profits, so I can sort of have a creative outlet, but also we can both make quite a bit of money.
Yeah.
And yeah, like we've got stuff going on, and it's challenging. There's a bunch of stuff which we need to do. So I don't know. And if it were up to me, it probably would have come out badly about 8 months ago. But thankfully, it's not up to me. I don't make those kind of decisions. I just write the books.
Nice. No, that I'm looking forward to that Kickstarter. I'm definitely backing it. Maybe I'll put my name in it somehow. But I have one last question before we get
Okay.
going. And if you had any advice to give to someone who either wants to try and break into the industry or write their very first RPG to try and sell, what would be the key advice that you would have?
Okay. So the tempting thing to say is to not try and fix D&D. Don't make your fantasy heartbreaker.
Yeah.
But I think everyone knows that by now. I think the thing I would encourage you to do is twofold. Is one is to make small games. So I did small games. I still do one small game a month.
Mhm.
It means that you get to, like, by small, I don't necessarily mean one page. I mean like 35 pages. You don't need art, that sort of thing. Just small, scrappy, interesting things.
Yeah.
The most important part of the creative process that I've found is finishing something. Because if you keep writing it longer and longer, and you hear these heartbreaking stories, people are like, oh, I've been writing this game for 15 years. It's like, well, it's probably not any good then, is it?
Yeah.
Because you've taken too long, and it's the Duke Nukem Forever problem at that point. Like it's just that you've come too far. This is a different thing.
Yeah.
And once you finish something, you get to one, share it with the world. And when you share it with the world, it's easier than ever these days. When you share it with the world, that means that people can give you money for it, perhaps, but also they can see you and they can recognize you and go, "Oh, this guy did these games. I like those games. I'll read more of his games in future. I'll buy some games in
Yeah.
future." So make small things, release them on itch.io, get a portfolio together, and show that you can, if you're interested in working for other people, show that you can communicate setting through mechanics. Because like as a commissioning editor, and as a fan of the medium, the only thing we've got over books is that we can give superpowers to the reader, which let them tell a story.
Yeah.
And you should show that you can do that as best you can. The other thing is, and it is the advice which your boomer parents give you, which is go there and shake some hands, kid. And it is one of the things which I find fascinating about American RPG culture compared to the UK is you guys have cons. We don't really have cons. We've got maybe 4 or 5, or like they're very, self-contained. It's just the same 8 people going every year to a cottage in the middle of bumfuck nowhere. Whereas in America, you've got specific cons for playtesting. And so there is a scene in America, just because you have the number of people and the infrastructure to make it happen. There is a scene, and you go along and you play other people's games. And so by the time you hit Kickstarter, I think it was Blades in the Dark that I found fascinating. Because I was on John Harper's on his Patreon, and I think I got like an early draft of it, but I didn't read it because it was quite long, and I'm quite jealous of how good he is. So I find it quite challenging. But he put it out, and then I think there was something like 20 different endorsements from people who I'd heard of, who'd already said, "Yeah, I've played this. It's great. Best game ever. Back it." So it's not fucking out yet. And so, but because he went to the playtest, because they knew him, because they were friends, because they existed as people, and there is an element of nepotism, but there's also an element of like go out and meet people and remind them that you exist, or meet people online, or play games online, do things together, collaborate. Don't try and do nice things with people who are in the industry. And it doesn't have to have an end in mind. You don't have to try and gear towards something. Just do nice things with people, and it might serve you well in the end.
That is really good advice. And also, as a Canadian, I am very jealous of my American counterparts, where they talk like, "Oh yeah, I drove like an hour to MaceCon or JeffCon or to the one over there," and I'm just like, I tried to look up like, is there any? Because I'm not Vancouver, so I'm the rest of Canada that doesn't really exist, and
I traded 3 moose for a skiff to a submarine. One guy was playing GURPS.
Well, I gotta say that does work out very well. Moose are very expensive here, so you can buy like half a house for 3 moose. So
really?
Nah, I don't know. We don't actually measure in mooses.
Oh, okay. Heartbreaking.
No, and
ours is syrup, isn't it? I'm sorry, it's syrup. It's syrup.
Yeah. Now for us, it's loons.
Oh, loonies and toonies.
Loonies and toonies. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we got weird money, but I love it. But I would like to thank you, Grant, for hopping on. This has been a really fun conversation. I've really enjoyed it, and I am super excited for your upcoming project. And I'm finally glad I know where Rowan Rook Deckard came from. This has been a mystery I've had for so long, and now I finally can say, "Oh yeah, I know why they named it. They wanted it to be legal." And
I spoke to Rook on the phone. I had an interview with him.
Quite.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad I could be of some assistance, and it was lovely to just enthuse about my shit for a while. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's been a pleasure, and I definitely have plans for my own table to run Unbound, since I haven't gotten to run it yet, but I've wanted to run it for so damn long.
All you got to do is session 0. That's fine. Just abandon it after that. But just get that session 0 in. They'll be very happy. I promise you.
Okay, sounds good. But anyways, folks, thanks for tuning in. I hope you guys had a good time. I know I did, and Grant, I hope you did too. And Yeah, we'll see you guys next week. Bye bye.
Bye.